Hello, it's Judith here with this week's video, and this week's video is all about fear of flying. I've just checked the statistics because I've been saying for years that 1 in 4 of the people on a plane have some level of fear of flying, and in fact it's higher than that. It's somewhere between a third and nearly half of the people on a plane have a fear of flying. Now, as I said, it's some form of, so as with all the things that I talk about, there is a range. So there's the people who have a reasonably mild level of discomfort, probably particularly nervous on takeoff, landing, and if there's significant turbulence. And then there's the people at the other end who are liable to have a panic attack. And as I've said before, this is the one thing I know about personally really, really well, because I suffered from a fear of flying, and I went from happy flyer, having flown from the age of 4, to having a panic attack on the plane for the first time. Absolutely fine up until we started to go down the takeoff runway, and then I had a panic attack. Came out of nowhere almost. So, you know, it can be at all levels, and it can start off mild and build, or as in my case, it can just whoom, bam, in there. I heard afterwards that it was not uncommon when you're flying the first time with young children, and my kids were 4 and 2 at that stage. So that's what I put it down to. May or may not have been true, but it makes some sort of sense, doesn't it? A lot of this emotional stuff doesn't always make sense, but you're on a plane with arguably the 2 most precious people in your lives, and they are very young and need help, and if anything happens, you've got them to deal with as well as yourself. I mean, I wasn't on my own, my husband was with me, which is 1 each, but even so. And yeah, the fear of losing them is probably worse than the fear of dying yourself. So yeah, it makes sense to me anyway. And I knew nothing of all this stuff then, so I just had another go. I mean, obviously I had to fly back. Somebody gave me some pills for that. I had another go, and then I gave up flying for years and years and years and years, and had to reintroduce myself to it gradually. So I find I have a reasonably steady flow of people with fear of flying, because particularly now we're not out of COVID, of course, but things are returning to normal and people are returning to their normal behaviours. I think it's taken us all a while to adjust back to how we were before. And I was talking to somebody the other day and just talking about the people we know, me included, are flying more frequently, having more holidays, sort of making up for lost time. So it doesn't matter. I mean, spring and early summer is probably the busiest period for people, but it can be autumn or winter, you know, people looking for winter sun. And obviously, if you haven't got kids, you will choose to go out of the peak holiday season, which is July and August. So what's it about, this fear of flying? Well, it's an interesting fear because it is a mixture of things. Not all are necessarily present for all people. Many times they are. So first and foremost, you've got which is where I came from. How on earth does something this heavy, with all these people and all this luggage that I've just seen put on this plane, manage A, to get up in the air, and B, once it's got up there, to stay there until it's time to come back down again? So, you know, a fairly practical fear. I'm saying fairly practical, but I knew somebody who had a private pilot's license and understood all about flying, and sat me down and explained it all to me on more than one occasion, and it didn't help. Understanding, I'm not quite sure I quite understood, but at the time maybe some of it, what's going on and how it stays up there, didn't help at all, because it still made no sense to me. So there's that element. So that's element number 1. Element number 2, and I didn't realise this, I'm back flying again. I've got over it. Not with the sort of help that I offer, unfortunately. I started with Valium and gin, which works, but you know, it's not ideal and I wouldn't recommend it. Particularly at 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning. And we were travelling, you know, one of those planes which has 4 seats in the middle, and I was kind of let my husband sit on the outside. So, and I realised that one of the elements of my fear of flying was claustrophobia. I think particularly because there is no escape. If you feel claustrophobic, if you feel shut in, then you want to know that you can get out when you want to. And of course, in a plane, that is not an option. Once those doors are shut, they have to stay shut for very good reasons until the plane lands. So you have no escape. You are stuck there for 2, 4, 6, 13, however many hours your flight is. And that is, I was talking to somebody who came to me recently and had a fear of driving, which is, again, very common. I don't think I've talked much about that. Anyway, he said at least with driving, because he also had a fear of flying, he said at least with driving, you can stop the car and get out. With flying, that's not an option. So we've got, really, how does this plane manage to stay in the air with all this weight? We've got claustrophobia. And I found it particularly in that position. I suddenly felt really, really, because I had people on both sides and in front, and then there were people out there in the seats on the other side of the aisle, and I felt really, really claustrophobic. And then for me, I do all 3, or did all 3. I'm better now. It's the lack of control. Now, I couldn't fly the plane if I had to. And I hope I'm never in the position where I'm the only one who could do that. But I am out of control. There's somebody up there at the front of the plane flying it. And I don't know this person. I don't know what sort of day or night this person has had. I don't know if they've recently lost a close relative or had an argument with a partner or whatever their state of mind is. So, yeah, I've no control over what's going on here at all. And for me, another element of that is, my understanding is mostly the plane is on autopilot. And it could do everything on autopilot. But because people are a bit scared about takeoff and landing, I don't think they do that on autopilot. That's my understanding. Please correct me if I'm wrong, or maybe don't. So in effect, it's a very interesting job. It requires a huge amount of skill and training and experience. But most of the time, you're sitting there looking at electronic readouts with nothing much to do. But if you do have to do something, i.e. when there's an emergency, you have to go from not doing very much to really being on it, knowing exactly how you're going to handle this or working out exactly you're going to handle it. So you go from being relatively relaxed to having to be at your peak performance level. And that's not easy. I don't know how they deal with this in training, but, you know, so that's another little element I've added in, or did add in, to my fear of flying. Okay, so you can be anywhere along this range. It can be any time of the year. It tends to start when people start talking about a trip or a holiday. It gets worse with booking. It then rumbles along, again at a different level. Some people are pretty frightened all the way from booking right the way through to the experience. Other people can sort of push it out their mind until it's getting closer. You know, immediately before it's starting to rise, getting to the airport. For me, getting to the airport was the thing. I was fine, and then I'm actually seeing planes, so I don't want to do that. And then obviously it escalates, that you get on and then you are shut in, and then you've got to go through the extremes of takeoff. And then for people who've got it really bad, they don't relax throughout the flight. For people who haven't, then they can relax unless those seatbelt signs go back on and you're told that there's going to be turbulence, or you experience the turbulence, which in my experience always happened once they've served you a meal, particularly a hot drink. So it's an interesting mixture of fears. It isn't life totally devastating your life unless you have to travel for your business or your work, in which case it can be hugely damaging. But it does stop you doing the things you wanted to do. The reason that I got back in a plane, albeit with Valium and gin, was there was a whole load of the world that I would never see because, you know, we'd driven all over Europe towing a caravan, but, you know, there were limits to how far you could go with that. So that's what got me back in a plane, the desire to see the world. And it is, as with all fears and phobias, relatively straightforward to deal with. And I know this is not belittling how you're feeling about it if you're experiencing it at the moment, but it is very straightforward to deal with. So if you are at the point of booking a holiday and starting to panic, have one booked and are panicking, or have one coming up very soon, I need 4 to 6 weeks, please. Then come and have a chat with me. I'll explain how it works and we can get rid of it literally in 4 to 6 weeks in most cases. Very, very rarely it takes longer. Okay, that's me for today. And if you haven't got a fear of flying and are flying soon, well then enjoy the flight and have a happy time away. But for the rest of you, if you need it, I'm here to help. Okay, take care of yourselves until I see you next week. Bye.